Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to start by thanking the Honourable Member for Beaches East York for splitting his time with me, and more specifically to thank the Government House Leader. It's been a difficult thing for me over the years, as you can imagine, to obtain speaking slots on important bills. I went too quickly, I think, on my last occasion where the Liberals offered me a speaking slot because it was on the application of time allocation on Bill C-69, which is an omnibus bill, and one where it certainly is egregious to have applied time allocation and make the bill omnibus in the first place. But there's no question, and I think it bears repeating, that the spirit of cooperation to members on the other side, such as myself, who are not likely to give a speech cheering the government on, it means therefore even more when the decision is made that a Liberal Member of Parliament will split speaking time to allow me to speak to the issues before us. In the instance of this budget speech, there is much to like in this budget. But before I get to that, let me just step back. This is a concern I have been raising for years, going back to my election in 2011. It has been some time since we've actually had a budget that one could honestly describe as a budget. By this I mean, in the old days, when I'd say before 2006, I'd go to budget lockups on behalf of Sierra Club of Canada. I'd open the budget and I'd be able to find a budget for every department in the Government of Canada. I'd be able to see what they spent last year, what they're going to spend next year. It would be easy to verify if there's an announcement in the budget, X hundreds of millions of dollars for thus and such. Is it new money? Is it reprofiled old money? We no longer know any of these things. There is no budget in the budget. Now, it is a fundamental principle of Westminster parliamentary democracy that Parliament controls the public purse. That is now a laughable anachronism. It is anachronistic to imagine that we actually control the public purse because we can't see into it. I think the budget every spring, I started describing this in the Harper era, should be called the annual thick spring brochure. It's very thick, it's full of good ideas and lots of good rhetoric, but it doesn't tell us what a basic budget, and every household knows this. What's the revenue coming in? What are the expenses going out? What's our bottom line? Well, we do know we have a deficit, we know the bottom line, but beyond that, we have to wait for supplementary estimates and other things that receive very cursory review in this place. So I do make the plea again. I noted some things in this budget that are truly puzzling, but they're not explained. I will mention that you can find this at page 324, that the Government of Canada is projecting virtually no increase in spending over a 5-year period. There's no explanation for it, but it's almost magical that right now there'll be $95 billion in spending this year, and in 2023 it'll be $97 billion. There is no explanation offered for how, over a 5-year period, spending stays virtually flat. There's also no explanation for where it appears to me, from reading the charts on page 311, and I could be wrong, we need to dive into this, there may be more explanations, but it looks to me as if there's $20 billion found in savings to pay for some of the new programs that are in this budget, but it's not explained. So there really isn't much budget in the budget. But there are some good things that are going to be funded, and I welcome those good things. Let me mention the good things before I dive into the things that worry me. The most important, I think, to the conscience of the nation is the commitment to fully implement the order of the Human Rights Tribunal in relation to the treatment of First Nations children. This is fundamental, it's important, and it is stated in the budget that it is $1.4 billion in new money. I congratulate the Minister for Indigenous Services, our former Minister of Health, and hope that she has all of our support in the task ahead. She's been very candid in laying out the challenges of providing clean drinking water, making sure every Indigenous person has access to affordable housing, that every Indigenous child has the same access to health care and educational opportunities as non-Indigenous children. This budget goes a long way to make that so. Money alone will not do this. I think we need to see this in a nonpartisan light as fundamental. Another thing I was pleased to see after 2 years of Liberal administration, I'd been disheartened to see our commitment to overseas development assistance falling. At the time, we have a commitment that came to us from our former Prime Minister, Lester B. Pearson, that every country on earth that's a donor country should contribute 0.7% of their GDP, gross domestic product, to overseas development assistance. The closest we ever got to that, by the way, was under former Prime Minister Mulroney. We got to 0.45%. When the new Prime Minister came in 2015, we were at 0.26. We dropped to 0.24. So I'm really pleased to see in this budget the first new money to overseas development assistance, a $2 billion commitment over the next 5 years. Pleased to see changes to reverse some of the damage done by the Conservatives to those recipients of seasonal employment insurance. Many industries are seasonal, and people who have to get employment insurance more than once in their lifetime are not recidivists who need to be punished. They're people who work in the tourism industry or in the forest industry, and we need to revisit that, and I would encourage the government to go farther than they have. And of course, we've seen a substantial commitment to the expansion of biodiversity protection, to nature, some money to science of studying whales. I hope we're not studying them as they move to extinction, but $1.3 billion over 5 years is certainly something that must be noted, and noted with approval. We've seen improvements in this budget in commitments to actual science. I'll never forget the words of the 2012 budget. Isn't it terrible that I actually remember verbatim the words of Harper's budgets? But in 2012, it was stated that money from the federal government to science must be for projects that are, quote, business-led and industry-friendly. In other words, no such thing as intellectual inquiry and basic fundamental research. So I'm pleased to see that's gone by the board. And most importantly, I'm pleased to see a commitment, no money, and I have to say the Minister of Finance's comments immediately afterwards suggest they don't understand the commitment, but a commitment to pursue pharmacare for Canada. Now, where am I disheartened? And I am fundamentally disheartened by this budget. Well, one thing we had been promised for small business was more clarity around the change in rules. It is true, and credit where credit's due to the Minister of Finance, the most controversial anti-small business provisions were eliminated, but there's still a lot of uncertainty for small business about how income sprinkling will work. It's said to not apply to those in the service sector, but that's not defined. So I would urge the government to consider giving the 1-year delay in implementation so that family businesses can sort this out, because it's not all that clear, and they could be penalized a few years down the road when they're audited. A second area where it's not quite what was promised, in October, there had been a commitment that past savings accumulated by small business and family-held businesses would not be prejudiced by this, that there would not be retroactivity. But when you really look at this, passive investments, if they're not really grandfathered because they can boot that small business out of the small business tax rate and have a really large impact on their effective taxes. So that needs to be revisited. But where I'm really horrified is that in the year 2018, we have a budget with nothing new to address the climate crisis. And in fact, we have some weakening of resolve. We were told initially that there would be a carbon price in place by 2018. The language we now find on page 151 of the budget is the government will review each system, referring to provincial systems, and implement the federal system in whole or in part on January 1st, 2019. Well, this is a very significant commitment, virtually the only one made by Liberals in their election platform, and it's slipping into the distant horizon. I also worry because another commitment made in the platform hasn't been acted on, and that's to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies. We can't keep subsidizing with tax dollars the very thing we're trying to reduce, which is emissions of fossil fuels. But in this budget, again, 2016 I was disappointed, 2017 disappointed, 2018 I'm almost giving up that this new government is capable of looking back to the budget of 2005, which was full of great climate programs. Eco-energy retrofits, very popular, job creators, fight greenhouse gases. We have to have an energy efficiency revolution. I can't find it here. We should be building the east-west electricity grid. It's not mentioned here. We are not seeing the programs to incentivize getting renewable energy for homeowners and small business, nor for energy-efficient vehicles and electric vehicles. I ask this government, look again. You have to do more on climate. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Before we go to questions and comments, I do have to go to order of conformément à l'article 38.
Pursuant to Standing Order 38, it is my duty to inform the House of the questions to be raised tonight at the time of adjournment.
Ridge, taxation. The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands, rail transportation, and the Honourable Member for Vancouver East, immigration, refugees, and citizenship. Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I appreciate the concerns that the Leader of the Green Party brings across and raises consistently in regards to environmental issues. I like to believe that we have a government that has been very sensitive, and not only sensitive, but has also materialized in different ways with respect to the environment, including incorporating it into all three budgets that we have actually presented. But my question is more so in regards to some of the social planning that has taken place. For example, in this budget, we are seeing the Canada Worker Benefit. Now, it's a takeoff of another program, but we are seeing it greatly enhanced, which will in fact allow many of the lower income individuals to receive that much more money back at an end of a fiscal year or for taxation purposes, thereby assisting those individuals that really need that extra assistance in the work environment. So when you take a look at that program, for example, for this budget, or you take a look at the Canada Child Benefit program, or the Guaranteed Income Supplement program, all programs that have really helped put more money in the pockets of individuals that really need that money. And I'm interested in her thoughts on those types of programs.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, let me just say parenthetically that when I speak of the climate crisis, I am not speaking of an environmental issue. The environment is involved, but it's no longer fundamental in the same way that drowning is very rarely described as a water issue. This is a matter of life and death. This is a security threat. We are not dealing with it as a security threat. We're dealing with it as one more thing, a bauble on the tree that we can attend to now and then. And really, in 2018, that may have been acceptable in 1995 or 96. Even in 2005, it was too late for that. So I lament it from the position of someone who is terrified of what will happen if we continue sleepwalking to the precipice of the climate crisis. Now, to the Parliamentary Secretary's points, absolutely. There is much that has been done that improves the status of people who are low income. I like the National Housing Program, although I think it is taking a long time to get roofs over people's heads, but at least the federal government is back in housing and looking at low-income housing. I agree the child benefit is better, but in a gender budget, where is the national program that we had in 2005 for universal child care in Canada?
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her excellent speech on the budget, and especially for her concern around climate change, which is something that really I am concerned with every day here in this place. I am very concerned with this government's putting things off year by year into the future, where it will be more of a cost to our children. And I just would like to give her some more time to talk about things like the Eco-Energy Retrofit program that was such a successful program under the previous government that leveraged billions of dollars that the Canadian consumers liked, Canadian homeowners liked, the business, the builders associations liked. Everybody benefited, and the environment benefited as well. And subsidies for electric vehicles. When I talk to representatives from Germany and Norway and Sweden, they can't believe Canada's not doing anything in those regard. And I just wanted to give her some more time to talk about some of the possibilities.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands has 1 minute to respond.
Well, thank you to my friend from South Okanagan, Kootenays. Look, the potential, the list of things we can do that stimulate the environment, the economy, while reducing greenhouse gases is very long, and they're proven technologies. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities, through their Partners in Climate Protection program, has a litany of examples of where municipal buildings were built that circulated cold water through the building in summer to advance the needs on air conditioning and reduce electricity costs, but circulated the warm piping through. I mean, there are so many examples of the use of heat pumps, the use of better insulation, saving money while reducing greenhouse gases and creating jobs. That's the true meaning of the economy and the environment go hand in hand. To have an inconsistent statement like I can build more pipelines, but because I'm a good person, therefore the environment and the economy go hand in hand, those kinds of meaningless bromides do violence to the concepts that are well understood, that when you do something that actually reduces greenhouse gases and creates jobs, then the environment and the economy go hand in hand. The environment and the economy are not going hand in hand when you build new fossil fuel infrastructure and incentivize more greenhouse gases at a moment when a moral responsibility should be on all political leadership globally to redouble efforts, because as things stand in Canada, we are nowhere near our Paris targets.